What would someone have to look like for you to trust them with your money, no questions asked? What about her? So she's standing on a street corner. She's asking for $5, and she stinks like cigarettes and booze. Okay, what about her? So she also wants $5, but she's collecting money for a local hospital charity. Where does your money feel safer? Who here reassures you that your money is going towards a good cause? Now, if you haven't figured it out, both of these photos are of me, 15 years apart, the first being the day I entered rehab. Now, I'm not sharing this for pity, but for perspective, as an illumination of how we prefer to give through a filter of comfort and whom we deem worthy of our help. That $5, it isn't just cash, it's power. It carries weight, it affirms. It's a symbol of belief, of dignity, and of being seen. It quietly says, "You matter. I trust you." Oversight is not generosity, it's gatekeeping. If we want to give with true generosity, we're going to have to surrender some control. But we tend to give with strings, with demands, because we want to know, where's our money going? Who is it going to? Who deserves it? Who has the most potential? Who's going to generate the most impact for my dollar? So we measure and we monitor and we analyze, confusing care with control and turning generosity into a bit of a transaction. And in that confusion, we push those most marginalized, those most urgently in need, further out of reach. Today, I want to suggest that we focus less on obtaining measurable outcomes and root our generosity in trust. Because I think that if we ask the question, who's missing from the conversation? Who challenges our assumptions? Who or what makes us feel uncomfortable? Our impact could be deeper, broader, and more meaningful than anything we could chart on a spreadsheet. Stigma blocks impact. We've built entire giving systems around our need to know that our impact fits into acceptable moral hierarchies. We reward what feels respectable, and we withhold from what makes us feel uncomfortable. We withhold because we don't actually trust that people are going to make the best decisions for their own lives, and therefore for our communities. But that is fundamentally and factually wrong. Over 200 universal basic income studies have been conducted globally. Overwhelmingly, the data shows that when people are given unconditional income, they increase their happiness, their healthiness, and their employability. But our concerns over unconditional income run deep. What if they don't want to work anymore? What if it raises inflation? Why should I work and pay taxes while somebody else gets a free ride? Well, okay, let's look at those we think this won't work for, those we assume will abuse it. The unhoused. A 2023 UBC study gave a one-time unconditional payment of $7,500 to newly homeless individuals. The results? The recipient spent 99 fewer days homeless over the course of the year. The program saved the government $777 in service costs per person. And for some reason, the most important finding for us all, no increased spending on drugs, alcohol, or cigarettes. But I bet your grip on that $5 is still pretty tight when I show you this photo. Why? You think she'll waste it? She'll spend it on smokes, booze? Let me ask you a question. So what if she did? Maybe she's going to spend it on one more day of survival, even if today survival means buying drugs. Maybe she'll spend it on a moment of reprieve, even if that's a cigarette, on the dignity of buying her own snack, even if it's junk food. And maybe she just gets a moment away from the street corner, away from the shame of having to ask for that $5. Isn't that enough? And I've had to ask myself this very same question. So I used to run a mid-sized business, and I didn't have much, but it was becoming successful, and I wanted to give back. So I looked around and I asked that question. Who is missing from the conversation on International Women's Day? Who do we refuse to celebrate? So, using my company's platform, I raised about $1,700 in support of sex workers. And after I made the donation, the executive director called to say that it was the largest public-facing donation that the organization had ever received. What struck her wasn't the amount. It was the fact that I had publicly supported a community so misunderstood that most people don't want to be associated with it at all. That is how I wanted to give. Into the shadows, into the margins, to those we can't see as whole, as worthy, as deserving, as I had once been seen. So I established 10 $250 unconditional grants for current and former sex workers. You didn't need a fixed address, there was no real application process, no educational requirement, no resumes. Just answer a simple question. How is this going to help you live better? However you define better for yourself. And the answers that came back were beautiful, they were human, and they were joyful. Art supplies to create ethically sourced taxidermy, dance shoes to rejoin a dance class, brake repairs to drive home to mourn the loss of a loved one. And for me, in that moment, art was enough, and joy was enough, and healing was enough. And then came the wrench. I was informed that one of the participants, I wouldn't know which, was likely to use this money on drugs. And was I okay with that? And just like you, at the beginning of this talk, I felt that same tension rise up in my chest. And I had to reflect back on my own struggles with addiction. And if I'm being honest, sometimes I found peace at the bottom of a bottle. One more sip to get through. One more moment that allowed me the personal grace to decide if my life was still worth living. Every applicant was seeking relief, connection, another chance to live with dignity. Sometimes survival will look like healing. Sometimes it's going to look like harm reduction. And it's not my job to decide which is more valid, because my role as the giver ended at the giving. It was none of my business how this person used the money I gave. My only job was to trust that it brought them some sort of peace. Control centers the donor, not the recipient. When we decenter the needs of the donor, we place trust in people to make decisions about their own lives. And when we give funds and resources, people must be given the opportunity to respond with agency, responsibility, and dignity, even if the definition of dignity does not match up with our own. And that is how I chose and still choose to give. I focus on small, localized grassroots campaigns or individuals that struggle to obtain funding simply because of the stigma they endure. The less likely the general public wants to look at it, the more likely I am to give to it. Indigenous land defenders, the incarcerated, immigrants, victims of police brutality, trans rights, sex workers, the addicted, the unhoused, the unseen. I never fund anything without speaking about it publicly, and I'll never publicly speak about a cause without backing it with funding. I give directly, I ask no questions, I demand no feedback. The impact doesn't need to be monumental or massive, only meaningful. $5 to a local hospital charity is a noble and worthy cause indeed, and still needed. I'm just saying that not a lot of people are buying smokes for the lady on the corner, but I might. Conditional giving reinforces oppression. When we demand complex reporting, robust data, academic grant writing, when we demand moral purity, assurance, or comfort, we exclude entire populations. It says you must perform your worth in order to be helped. Unconditional giving, trust-based giving, says you're worthy, period. And these ideas are not new, and nor are they necessarily my own. This is grounded in concepts around mutual aid, which is the direct and unconditional sharing of resources and funds to meet common needs. You can't pay your rent, you're about to get evicted? Let's get together and pay your rent. You don't have any groceries? Let's get you some groceries. This is a well-documented survival practice that takes place primarily in and between marginalized and oppressed communities. The difference there is that the trust is inherent. It says, I see you because I am you, and therefore I trust you. But this is also being put into practice at the highest levels of philanthropy. And one of the best-known examples is Mackenzie Scott, one of the wealthiest women in the world. She donates vast, one-time lump sums, no strings attached, often without notice. There's no application, no interviews, no reporting. And the way she puts it is beautiful and succinct. She cedes power to cede power. And listen, we give away our money all the time without question. When you invest in a pension plan or a mutual fund, do you know exactly where your money is going? Probably not, because we trust institutions far more often than we trust our neighbors or our communities. The 2022 Global Sustainable Investment Review found that only 15% of sustainable investment funds met their own ESG standards. That means our money goes into systems that fund war, fuel climate collapse, and exploit the vulnerable. We trust billionaires to fix our world, not the poor to feed themselves. Letting go isn't reckless, it's radical. I'm not advocating for you to go down to your local Skid Row and empty out your pockets, although if you did that, it would be super nice. I'm asking you to loosen your grip on your need for proof, to reach into the margins and seek those who can't or won't be measured. I'm asking you to reframe what peace, dignity, or survival might mean to someone outside of your lived experience. Empathy and understanding do not require proximity to suffering. It only requires that you believe that it exists. Unconditional giving gives us the opportunity to upend systems of control and scarcity. $5 to the right or to the wrong person, depending on who you ask, can be a groundbreaking act because we don't just transfer wealth, we transfer power. Generosity should not be quantified by the size of the gift or the impact measured. It should be rooted in the unshakable belief that every person's dignity is inherent. And then once we do that, our only job is to hold space for their sovereignty. And that is what I meant when I said that our impact could be deeper, broader, and more meaningful. I didn't mean for you. I meant for them.